Did two personalities control the mind of the mass killer Kenneth Bianchi? Was he a true Jekyll and Hyde, as some of the psychiatrists claimed? Was he insane? This film investigates the mind of the Hillside Strangler.
Bianchi is probably as cold a killer as I've met.
The Ken I knew couldn't have ever hurt anybody or killed anybody.
Obviously, he's a very complex person who's unable to accept responsibilities for his actions and gets a thrill out of killing young girls.
He was very sincere, kind, and he had a certain magnetism about him that drew all women to him.
Well, he's a man with a tremendous ego that is intelligent and has the ability to do whatever he wants to do. But he is also a multiple murderer.
After interviewing him intensely for 2 days, I was quite convinced that he was a full-fledged multiple personality.
I consider him an actor. This psychological defense, I think, is a bunch of hooey.
I don't really understand the multiple personality bit, but the person I did at once know couldn't have done it.
Well, he seemed like a very cooperative, pleasant individual, but any time you're dealing with a forensic case, a premeditated murder, an individual facing a death penalty, you have to be aware that he is tremendously motivated to convince you that he is insane and that way not be responsible for the things he did.
There was no doubt that Kenneth Bianchi was a killer. But was his insanity defense genuine, or was he faking to avoid the death penalty? In this program, for the first time, cameras observe psychiatrists as they interview a mass killer to assess his sanity. These interviews have been obtained through a court order by Horizon. They show Mr. Bianchi's two different personalities. First, the all-American boy, Ken.
Well, I came there hoping to find a better job. I've always wanted to go to California, the sun, the girls, the beaches. You know.
The other side of Ken's personality, of which he claimed to know nothing, was a violent character called Steve, who later confessed to the killings.
I told you, killing abroad doesn't make any difference to me. Killing anybody doesn't make any difference.
Maybe you didn't kill any of those. I don't know.
Oh, hey, no, wrong, man. Hey, I killed a couple of these.
Well, which one? You think you did, right? I don't know.
I killed her. Angelo killed her.
They mean the Wagner one Angelo killed.
This broad I'd never seen before.
Martin.
This broad I'd never seen before.
Hudspeth, you never saw them at all?
No.
Oh.
This broad I'd never seen before.
Robinson?
This broad I killed. These two Angelo killed.
Vector. Johnson.
This one I'd never seen before.
Angelo killed, huh?
This one I'd never seen before. This broad I killed.
Barcombe you never seen before. This Caston is the broad you killed, you say.
Am I going too fast?
Yeah, you're going so damn fast. I'm not that smart.
These scenes began a controversy that was to put psychiatry itself on trial. Was Steve another separate personality who fought for the mastery of Ken's body? Was Steve responsible for the horrific murders which the all-American boy Ken denied he had ever done?
The killings progressed from a straight strangulation killing to actually trying to gas one of the girls using gas from the house in a plastic bag. One of the girls was hooked up to 110 volts, taping the circuit to her hands and plugging her into 110, presumably to watch her jump. One of the girls, in fact the one that was suffocated with the gas, was injected with some sort of cleaning solution. We don't know exactly what the solution was, but presumably she went into some sort of convulsions because of that. We got a feeling there was something in progression that became more grotesque, more adventuresome, and more hideous, really.
By late 1977, 10 young women had been raped, tortured and strangled, and their bodies dumped on hillsides overlooking the freeways. The murders had terrorized Los Angeles. A year later, there was a double murder in the town of Bellingham, 1,000 miles further north in the state of Washington. Ken Bianchi was arrested. He was an unlikely suspect, a proud father and a member of the Sheriff's Reserve. He denied the charges, said he had no memory of the killings, and refused an insanity defense. Only when Mr. Bianchi was hypnotized to unblock his memory did the completely different character called Steve emerge and confess not only to the Bellingham murders, but also to those in Los Angeles, which, he said, were done with his cousin, Angelo Buono. Angelo denied the allegations that he was involved in the killings. The police faced a major problem. Their case against Mr. Buono depended on the testimony of Kenneth Bianchi. But if Mr. Bianchi was found insane, he might not be allowed to testify against his cousin.
After I examined Bianchi on March the 21st and 22nd, 1979, both in hypnosis and out of hypnosis, I concluded that he was definitely a true multiple personality case. In fact, one of the most clear-cut ones I had seen in working with that type of problem over many years.
Does that mean to say he's insane at the time of the crimes?
Well, he is in the sense that he, Kenneth Bianchi, the fellow I was talking to there in Bellingham, was not the person who was in control at the time of the killings. And if you relate that to this test for insanity, it would appear to fall under that legal category, yes.
The court had appointed its own expert, independent of both the prosecution and the defense, Dr. Ralph Allison.
In my considered professional opinion, Ken Bianchi was legally insane at the time of the killings in Bellingham because of having multiple personalities.
The prosecution pinned their hopes on Dr. Martin Orne, professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of Pennsylvania. Before interviewing Mr. Bianchi further, he decided to look at the increasingly bizarre findings of the police investigation into Mr. Bianchi's past.
I didn't rely only on what Mr. Bianchi said to the experts. I felt it was very important to determine what he had said and what was seen by other people long before he was arrested. Especially in a first-degree murder case, I feel I cannot rely on what the defendant says without corroboration. So I insisted on getting all of the police records and comparing this with what he said to all of us. And it led to some very interesting data. For example, there was an interaction between Angelo and Mr. Bianchi, which must have been truly memorable with an individual that occurred several years before he was arrested.
That individual was Mr. Tiny Boyles, a 440-pound, 6-foot bodyguard. Some years ago, Tiny had run across Mr. Bianchi and Angelo Buono. His meeting was to become significant in Dr. Orme's investigation, for Tiny had discovered that Mr. Bianchi was not quite the all-American boy he at first seemed.
But you do know that they were running a ring of prostitution and using young girls, exploiting them. Mainly for, the best I could find out in my investigation, they were using them for blackmail.
Tiny had learnt that while Mr. Bianchi and Angelo Buono were running a ring of underage prostitutes, they had fallen out with one of their clients, a Los Angeles lawyer. To bring him round to their point of view, they made death threats against him, and the lawyer responded by sending Tiny Boyles and 4 of his friends to reason with them.
Buono was working on a car, detailing it. And I kept talking to him, and he kept ignoring me. So I reached in the window and jerked him out through the window so fast, so hard, he left his shoes in there. And while I had him up in the air, I asked him if he'd all mind paying attention to me. So while I was dangling him in the air, he paid full attention, so I lowered him back down on the ground. And I gave him one of the lawyer's cards, and I told him, I said, don't be offering to kill him no more. Because the last thing in the world you want's an instant replay of me.
So how did Buono react to that?
He told me there'd be no more troubles.
And what about Bianchi?
Bianchi is a little sniveling poo butt. But he was what you call the doc, what we call the perverted doc. His job was, if girls were scared of snakes, he put snakes on them. He done that to make sure they brought the money home. He worked on their morbid fears. And he run behind his security door, which he'd already knew who we were, what we were. And he's behind his door, holding the security door, sniveling. Please don't hurt me, please don't hurt me. Well, we knew they were into something heavy, but we didn't know what. But if I'd have known it was killing those little young girls, one of those girls was, what, 13, 14 years old? If I'd have known it, I got 4 daughters of my own, I'd have snapped their neck like a twig and not had no remorse for it.
Dr. Orne decided that this encounter was important enough to ask Mr. Bianchi if he could remember Tiny and his friends.
Yeah, but I understand that whoever it was got some 5 tough, big guys to talk with you, reason with you, how it's put.
No, you got the wrong person. Angelo.
Oh.
They visited Angelo's shop.
I see, but
They were bikers. They're called motorcyclists from a local bike club. They visited Angelo's shop.
Yeah, but they came, look, you know, I wasn't there, but I understand they came to see you also, and you kind of got away just as they were coming. I'm trying to think back, because that must have been a very impressive group. Mr. Bianchi's not remembering an event which is very memorable is very telling. Either he is giving me a barefaced lie, and he's been accused of being a pathological liar by many people, or the same thing could be explained by his being multiple